Hi, and welcome to this class on loose watercolor. I am Camilla. I'll be your teacher for the day, and I'm a watercolorist from Denmark. I can't wait to show you loose watercolor. If you have been following me on Instagram or here on the school or maybe even on Skillshare, you probably already know that loose watercolor is one of my absolute favorite visual languages. And I'm saying a visual language because that is exactly what it is. Often I refer to it as a style, and I think you can do that as well. But when it comes down to it, this is also a visual language. And when you think about it like that, it'll be a lot easier to actually do it. Because a lot of you had told me that you've been struggling with this style of watercolor. So I really want to dive into some tips and tricks so you can quickly learn at least the way to loose watercolor. And after that, I'm going to show you how to translate a motif from the drawing or the reference photo to the visual language that we call loose watercolor. So first, I'm gonna give you the quick tips and tricks, and after that, we're gonna go a little bit more in depth with the actual visual language technique. So, without much further ado, let's just dive into the class. First, I want to talk a little bit about brushes. We all know that brushes are our best friend, and I bet you have a lot of brushes at home, and I certainly do. Somehow I just can't stop buying brushes when I'm out, so it's an addiction, I think. I hope it's not contagious. But I want to tell you a little bit about the brushes that you can use and a way you should use them, or you can use them if you want to paint loose watercolor. First, I want to encourage you, and this is a little bit difficult for some, but I want to encourage you to start with the biggest brush you are comfortable with. So a lot of us are starting with these smaller brushes. This is a synthetic, and I think it's a 4. I think it's a 4. I've used it so much that I almost can't see. Yeah, 4. Okay. A lot of us use these smaller brushes because we're more comfortable with them and we can go in detail and be super precise. But try to, it's okay, you have it. And I think we're gonna use it later, but only at the end of the painting. First, I want to encourage you to take the biggest brush you are comfortable with. I think this is a 11. And this is a synthetic brush, but it acts like a natural hair brush. Yes, but you can use both. Try both and see what is best for you, but definitely go big and bold. And then there is a tip to hold the brush, because a lot of us go all the way down to the bristles like this, holding it super tight and being super precise. When we do this, our wrist will get hurt. We're all tight and crumpling it up, and we don't want to do that. We want to be, this is our friend, we want to be careful. Hold it lightly, like this, it can move. So we haven't got that much control. And then I encourage you to try to move your hand up the handle. If you go all the way up here, you will have very, very little control. Don't do that, at least not in the beginning. You can at a later stage. But go up here, or even further, and you lose a lot of control. And this is a great way to loosen up your strokes and really just think about the big shapes instead of the small details. So move your hand up the handle. The second tip I'm gonna give you is about paint. I want to encourage you to go bold and bright and use the clean colors. Of course you can mix, and the paint will mix and mingle on the page and on the paper, but try to start out with the clean colors and let it mingle for itself in the water. That way you get a lot brighter and crisper look to your painting. Also, try to see if you can go do this painting in a few layers. So don't overwork it with the 4 and 5 and 6 and 7 layers. You can do that, but at some point you get a very detail oriented, and you might lose some of the looseness and freshness of the first layers. So try to trust yourself that you can do this in a few layers, and I will of course show you a little bit later, but for now that is my tip to you. The third tip I'm gonna give you is white space, and that is quite essential for all watercolor painting, I think, but it's also important here. You want to make sure to preserve some white space around your watercolor and your paint, and the reason you want to do that is because that white space really lets your painting breathe, and I'm just gonna show you a few examples here while I talk. The white space gives the painting kind of a mental break and helps us focus on what is important in the image. So if you have filled all the page with paint because you couldn't stop, and I totally know that problem, I recognize it from myself, but if you do that, you really lose the freshness and the crispness of the painting, and that's because the white really it's letting it breathe, like I said before, but it also makes if you have some muddy colors and it kind of it muddied up in the mixing process or in the water mixing, the white space will somehow make them feel cleaner and brighter, which is magic. I have no idea why, but it's the fact. So make sure to preserve some white space. The last the last tip that I'm gonna give you in this short introduction is, when you are creating a loose fluid look, you want to make sure to use fluids. Yes, I know it sounds very obvious, but I do apologize for that. But you want to make sure to use water, and not just a little water on your brush, a lot of water. So when you are thinking about paper, make sure it can hold a lot of water. I always use 300 grams, often cold pressed, but that doesn't really matter here. But make sure that it can handle a lot of water. You want to either tape it down with some masking tape, or use pads like these that has a glue here on the sides. Sorry, my cat fell down. A little tip is to use extra fluid. Yes, you put the fluid down, put the water down on the paper, and then you put your paint down, and then you can add even more, like with these. This is a mist spray. It's a big one for flowers, I think. My flowers have not seen anything of that, so maybe they should, but I use it for wetting my paper, and I use this as well. And the big one is for actually the initial wetting of the paper. So if I don't want to go in with a brush and just wet the entire page, I want to do it random, and I'll show you in the example later. Then I use this, the pre-wetting, and this small one, you can get these everywhere in small shops. This is when I have edges I feel like is too edgy, and I just want to smoothen it out and make it more ethereal and moody or misty. I use this water mist spray. So that's a good tip. Use plenty of fluid, and then you can add more in a either with a brush or with a mist spray. And that is actually all the tips I'm gonna give you of these quick tips. Now I want to show you how to actually translate a reference photo from the reference photo into the visual language of loose watercolor. Now we are ready to dive into this small project, and the first thing I'm going to do is pull up a reference photo. Here you go. These are some beautiful bright tulips, and I'm just gonna sketch them out real quick. When it comes to a visual language and creating loose watercolor, it's not just diving in with color on your watercolor paper. I promise we're gonna get to that, but first I want to let you observe first, because when you are painting something very loose and just focusing on the shapes and the colors, like you do in loose watercolor, you really have to know your subject first. Otherwise it'll just be super blobby and a little bit annoying for yourself. So do yourself a favor and actually study the objects that you want to create first. So you can see I'm doing a very loose sketch. I'm actually holding my pencil pretty far up the handle as well, like I do with my brush when I'm painting loose. And I'm just trying to capture the big shapes here and just seeing how the flow is in this bouquet. And you can use this with every motif. You can do buildings or animals or whatever. Just the important thing is that you give yourself time to observe, and it's not something that takes time. Now I have the main shapes down here, and I want to focus a little bit on the flowers, which will be my focal point for my painting. So I want to add a little more detail to some of the flowers. And I'm going to do that on the painting as well. So this is a reminder for myself, but also just a way to get to know my flowers a little bit better. Just to see how does the petals overlap, how do they curve, and in general just what is the main attraction of this flower. We have these long, beautiful, elegant leaves that are just overlapping and curving, very beautiful on the edges. So that's gonna be our focus. And as I said before, this doesn't have to take time. This video is 5 minutes or something like that, and you don't need any more than that. So do yourself a favor and do this a little practice before diving into your painting. It really helps a lot, and the more you do it, and also the more times you paint the subject, of course, it'll get better and looser and softer and lighter. I actually think I paint one flower 10 times before I feel like I nailed the shapes. And I haven't done the tulips that many times, but I wanted to paint it with you and use this as an exercise. As I said before, I am going to do a floral class, loose florals, in October 2020. And this is meant to be a small practice run before we dive into the real paintings. And I wanted this to be kind of just showing you the techniques that I'm going to go in depth with in that class. You can see I'm adding a little bit more darkness here, because we know then where to put our darker colors and darker values when we are doing our painting. Of course, we won't be super precise with that, and that's totally fine. It's just a random way of just showing light and shadow. Hopefully it'll shine through when I do the painting, hopefully. Let's see. But for now, I think my sketch is done. Just gonna zoom in here so you can see it. You can see super big strokes and just loose and carefree. So now we are going to do another sketch in pencil. This is not gonna be as soft a pencil as before. This is just an HB pencil, but I'm going to do it on my watercolor paper. And as I said before, this is just a practice run to show you the techniques. So I'm not gonna use any expensive paper, and I'm not gonna tape it down or use a glued up pad. I'm just gonna use tape here in the corners and put it on a hard surface. And I'm gonna use my HB pencil, and I'm gonna do a sketch. And I actually decided after I did the sketch here that I wanted to move it to the right, just to spice up the composition a little bit and do it a little less harmonious, I guess. So I'm just gonna do a light sketch here. I'm not pushing hard at all. I just want to put my main shapes down. Get the water line. And then we have this big leaf here that is just hanging over the side. I want to add that to the sketch as well. Remember, you can always remove, you can't always remove pencil. If you paint over the pencil, you won't be able to erase it. So make sure you are drawing very light. And I'm not gonna remove my pencil lines, but you can. A trick is to go over it with your eraser and just remove almost all the graphite. Of course you want to be able to see a little bit, otherwise you won't be able to know where to put your shapes. But you can go over it with an eraser, and I do recommend that. I'm not gonna do it because I want you to see where my pencil line is for this exercise. And if you practice this a couple of times, you won't even need the pencil lines. You'll just know instantly where you'll put your shapes. And you can see how it really is just shapes. There's these ovals that are the flowers, and then we have all these wiggly lines that represent the leaves. So it's super rough and super light. Just gonna do a little bit of stems here inside of the bowl as well, and I think we are done. So now we're gonna start out by wetting the paper, and as I said before, I'm gonna wet it with this mist spray here. And the reason I'm doing that, you'll see in a second. I could totally I'm just gonna wet the paints as well here. I could totally just use my brush and put some water down, but I like the randomness of this mist spray. So you can see what happens when I put down my paint here. How cool is that? It's just spreading and it's looking so soft, and that's because the mist spray just really created this almost like a pattern of small droplets of water, and it's just beautiful. So right now I'm just putting down some sap green in the places where I drew the leaves, and you can see I held the brush a little higher on the handle when I did the leaves, but these tulips are painted a little closer to the bristles, but I'm trying to loosen up here a bit. I'm using a quinacridone coral for this and mixing it up with a quinacridone rose, so 2 reds here. And you can see I'm not being that careful with my my reds here. I just want to put down the shapes and leave some white as well. Hopefully I'll be able to preserve the whites. But remember, this is a practice piece we're doing, and we just want to see how it reacts, and we can learn from it. You can see I just added a little bit of yellow as well in the greens too, just for a little bit of sunshine. And here I'm adding some darks, and remember, this is very wet, so the paints will just mingle and create some soft dark tones in between the greens. And this is oh Christ, it's a Payne's gray. Okay, I'm getting tired apparently. It's a Payne's gray. Okay, I'm just wetting my bowl here and letting the greens just flow into the water. And now I'm adding a little bit of the Payne's gray, just for a subtle effect. It's looking pretty cool. Just adding a little bit here for the water, and a little bit of a table here, and just adding more water so it can flow and be pretty. Actually, I'm gonna drop in some clean water here as well, just for some texture. Table surfaces tend to be a little bit boring, so I like to add some texture. I'm gonna add the clean water droplets here as well, both to the vase and to the florals, to see what happens. Just doing some splatters here in the green and the coral. And now I can add a little more paint here and there, but only do this while it's wet. If it starts to dry, just don't touch it, and you'll be good. And just adding a little bit of the coral to the other surfaces. If you use it in the flowers, you want to use it in other places as well, because it really ties together the piece. I'm just going to use this, the small water spray, for some flow in a few areas. That's looking pretty cool. Just a little bit there, and I think up here as well, and up there. Okay, now I have to stop myself, because this is actually looking pretty cool. But okay, I'm not sure. I might have overdone it with that top one, but let's see how it goes. Now it's dry, and we can go in and look at some of the details of this painting. I'm just gonna show you a couple of things here. That edge here is kind of crazy. Some of the paint has dried up really in a really cool pattern, which I like. I think up there's a trouble area. I hope I can fix it. That spray that I questioned in the ending of the other video session was that was a good reason why I questioned that, because that turned out a little muddy and a little annoying. So hopefully we can fix it. And now I'm just gonna strengthen the colors. We have a good foundation, and now we can add color, and that way really create some depth, because we have these very misty looking tulips. And now we can add detail and color and create another dimension. So that's really cool. Also, I forgot to paint a few of these, this bud here, and also one on the right side. So I'm just gonna add those as well. This is super dry, so that's why I can do it. Of course, it's also because it's very light. if there was some heavy pigment, you wouldn't be able to paint over it. And while I'm doing this, the underneath wash will also shine through, because as you all know, watercolor is transparent, so that'll happen as well. When you're doing this second wash, where you strengthen the colors and the shapes, don't go into detail just yet. You want to make sure that the details are in the end, and we're just keeping it loose as long as we can. Just dip in a little bit of color here and there, so as it's still wet, it'll mingle and create some beautiful color play. I actually really like those colors in the greens here. You can strengthen that leaf that is hanging out here, and doing some more here. And when you're doing this technique, you really it's great for leaves and greeneries, because when you're doing a regular bouquet in a not a loose style, oftentimes you'll paint a lot of leaves, but then suddenly you won't be able to, don't know what to put in between the leaves, and you'll just have white space and it looks really weird. But here you have some dimension, because you have this the first wash is kind of a backdrop for our second wash leaves, so there's no awkward silence in the bouquet. I'm just gonna let the stems here kiss some of the flowers, and the red will mingle with the green and be beautiful. Just really be careful not to touch it too much, especially because it's green and red and they are complementaries, so they will muddy up really fast. But I think when we are painting them next to each other and not touching them too much, they create a beautiful dramatic painting, so that's cool. I just wet the left side of my vase here, just adding a little bit of the Payne's Gray, also here on the top, and I'm just softening it so it's not that hard of a line, and just adding a bit of the Payne's Gray in some of the shadow areas here as well. And when you are mixing the very dark colors with the very light, you get a beautiful dramatic effect, which is really just pushing everything in a very, very cool direction. So definitely try that. Don't be scared of using darks. And as I said in one of the tips, you really want to use the bold colors, bright and bold, and just let them mix on the paper. And I hope that you've been able to see these the tips in this demonstration. Here I'm just adding a little bit of the rose to the wash here in the shadow. As I said before, you want to incorporate the other colors into every piece of the painting, even if this is just a shadow. I'm just adding the green and the red as well. It gives more interest to the painting. And just fixing the water line there. And I'm not gonna do anything about the vase on the right side, and I actually think I'm gonna keep that pencil line. I know it's gonna turn into a mixed media piece just right like that, but I kind of like it. It's almost like unfinished on purpose. And I'm not sure about that a little bit of annoying blob on the top right side, but hopefully it won't look as bad when this layer dries. I'm just adding a little bit of clean water here to the left side, and letting some of the paint just flow a little bit into the water, and just creating this atmospheric feel. And I'm not gonna do any more now. Let's let it dry. So here we have not the final painting, but we are ready to add the final details. So all the big lines are done. I love the colors and the shadows in here in the greens. But I think we need some details. So that's where we are finally using our small brush, a size 4 synthetic round brush. And it's actually the first time I'm using this brush in this painting. And now we are adding the details. And now is a good time to take a look at your reference again. I'm just putting it up here so you can see it. When you are doing this, don't go into a botanical drawing where you just show every detail. That's not the point of this exercise. Try to see where there's lines, where do these petals overlap, and how do they curve. And see how little do you need to do to actually show that. And when we are adding the details, and mostly only adding it to the flowers, we will lead the eyes of the viewer to the flowers. So you can see how I am just working on one here. And I'm not going to do details on all of them. We don't want the focal point to be all flowers, but I'm going to do some. As I'm just adding lines that show where they curve. And you can think of this almost like drawing with your brush. And the first sketches that we did, they really help with this process, because now you have a better understanding of the curves. So if you're in doubt, take out that sketch and look at it, and you have a nice guide for you. And work with a color that is pretty thick, and then if it turns out a little too thick, just wet it with a little bit of water and smoothen it out, but don't do it everywhere. You want to have a mix of hard lines and soft lines to create this soft look. I'm just gonna zoom in here again so you can see some of the lines in this tulip here. These are a little bit longer, but still curving to show the shape of the tulip here. And you can see how the details really make these flowers pop out of the painting. It's amazing how the mix of detail and softness can create such an interesting look. Here you go, just zoomed out again, and you can we can get an overview of what we need. Just gonna do a little bit of detail on this one as well. I apologize for putting my hand right in front of your view. I'll remove it in a second. But basically I'm doing exactly the same as I did earlier. And you notice that I actually flipped my painting from the reference, so the hanging tulip is on the left side instead of the right side. And I did that because I changed my composition to the right, so I wanted to still maintain that hanging tulip, and I think it works out pretty nice here. Here I'm just adding a little bit of darkness under that leaf to emphasize that it's tipping over the edge, and just adding a little bit of lines here. And this is a mix of my sap green and a Payne's gray, so this is just a dark toned green, and I'm using it everywhere, so it ties the motif together. And again, don't be afraid to use dark mixed with the white on the page. It's working really effectively. So I even use this green to create some details in some of the flowers. And when you're doing this process, make sure you're not overdoing it. It's easy to overdo this, and you don't want to do that. So just when you feel like you are 80% done, you want to stop, and you can sleep on it or just work on something else. But make sure you're not continuing when you are almost done, because chances are you are done, but you won't be able to see it until tomorrow. And I think we are going close to the 80% now here, so I think I'm gonna call this piece done. I'm just gonna add a little bit more, not much, just, and then we can zoom in and you can see the final result. Here you go, and let's wrap up. The final note that I have is that I am, at the moment, we are in September 2020, creating a floral watercolor loose class. Loose floral watercolor, yes. And this is my absolute favorite motif, and I can't wait to share all my tips and tricks with you. So I will give you a heads up if you joined this class, so you'll know when it's out. And I hope to see you in there if you are interested in loose watercolors. And if you're not, you can just jump on Instagram and follow me there, or on Skillshare, or wherever you are present. I'd love to see you in the Facebook group as well. So I hope to see you in another class, and I will see you next time.